Liebe Zuschauer, herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge von Im Auge des Bruders mit Scott Ritter auf unserem YouTube-Kanal Gegenpol. Mein Name ist Monique Stegemann und heute wird es um folgende Themen gehen. Die Lage an der ukrainisch-russischen Front nach der Einnahme von Awdejewka durch die russischen Streitkräfte. Der Fall des russischen Oppositionspolitikers Alexei Nawalny, ein Spielball westlicher Geheimdienste. Deutsches Sicherheitsabkommen mit der Ukraine. Was fehlt noch, bis die Bundesrepublik zur Kriegspartei wird? Und Scott Ritters Rat an unser Publikum. Was muss Deutschland tun, um sich selbst zu befreien? Lass uns auf die aktuellen Entwicklungen an der ukrainisch-russischen Front schauen, Scott. Ende letzter Woche haben die russischen Streitkräfte die Stadt Awdejewka eingenommen. Während der ukrainische Oberbefehlshaber Alexander Syrski von einem geordneten Rückzug zur Stabilisierung sprach, betonte der ukrainische Präsident Wladimir Selensky sogar, dass die Russen damit rein gar nichts eingenommen hätten. Von russischer Seite wird hingegen von einer Überrumpelung und einem fluchtartigen Rückzug der ukrainischen Truppen gesprochen. Wie bewertest du die Vorgänge in Awdejewka? Was bedeutet die Einnahme der Stadt für Russland, militärisch wie politisch? Und was bedeutet der Verlust für die Ukraine?
Well, clearly this is a victory that Russia has been striving for some time now. This city, it's an industrial city. It centers around a coke plant. Coal related. It had been turned into one of the most heavily fortified positions of the Ukrainian military lines in Donetsk. It straddles a critical north-south highway. And from Avdiivka, the Ukrainians were able to launch artillery strikes against the city of Donetsk, terrorizing the Russian population that lives there. So the Russians viewed this as a thorn in their side, but it was a thorn that couldn't be extracted because of the fortifications, the density of the fortifications. It's a very tough nut to crack. Well, that nut's been cracked. It's over. There's no debating this issue anymore. Avdiivka has fallen. It's in Russian control. History will be the judge. The Ukrainians right now are frantically trying to write their version of history, and the Russians are, of course, writing their version. I'm not going to get in the middle of this. The Ukrainians say what they say. I think the evidence shows that they abandoned hundreds of their wounded. No military who's conducting an orderly withdrawal abandons hundreds of their wounded. They suffered thousands of dead. Withdrawal under fire is a very difficult thing to pull off, and you suffer casualties. The Ukrainians suffer casualties. Are the Ukrainians going to be able to stabilize their lines? That's one of the things they said, is that they're withdrawing from Avdiivka in order to shorten their lines, to be able to accumulate reserves, etc. We'll see. I think the answer is no. That this was a hasty withdrawal, that the units involved no longer exist as functioning combat-worthy units. The 110th National Guard or Territorial Brigade, the 3rd Assault Brigade, which is the former Azov unit. And there's some hints here about the capabilities of the Ukrainians. Some of the prisoners that were captured from the 3rd Assault Battalion or Brigade, aren't Azov people. They've actually been transferred into this brigade recently, within 2 weeks. They have limited training. They don't know who their commanders are. They don't know anything. This is a sign of panic. It's a sign that the Ukrainian units aren't cohesive units anymore, that they're being hastily thrown together to carry out missions that they're not trained or equipped to do. The Russians dominated this battlefield. They dominated from an artillery standpoint, from a drone standpoint, from an air standpoint, and from a maneuver standpoint. And we'll find out in the days and weeks to come. Is this a one of? Did the Russians just get a one-time victory and now the battlefield will stabilize? Or is this a model that can be replicated over and over again? In Zaporizhia, Russia has accumulated 40 to 60,000 troops, and they're starting to counterattack in the Robotyno area. We'll see if they're able to sustain that. Up in Kupiansk, the Russians have assembled another strike force of 40 plus thousand. Will they be able to continue to advance? We'll know the answer in a couple weeks' time. Now, the Ukrainians will try to explain it away to show that whatever they do, it's a sign of the genius of their new commander. But I think at the end of the day, what we're seeing here is the collapse of the Ukrainian army. It's the beginning of the end. The glue that held them together, that made them a cohesive military force, is no longer there, and they're starting to fall apart.
In unserem Interview vergangene Woche hast du analysiert, dass aufgrund der taktischen Erfolge der Ukraine im Schwarzen Meer Russland gezwungen sein werde, die Stadt Odessa von Land aus einzunehmen und die Ukraine somit vom Meereszugang abzuschneiden. Unsere Zuschauer haben gefragt, liegen solche Pläne wohl bereits vor? Siehst du, Scott, bereits russische Vorbereitungen dafür? Und in welchem Zeitrahmen könnte eine solche russische Offensive auf Odessa erfolgen?
Well, one has to assume that the Russian general staff is professional, and therefore they have prepared plans. Just because you prepare a plan doesn't mean you're going to execute it. You need to have thought through what the problem is, how many forces you need, what the logistical requirements are, etc. But don't take it from me. Abdi Aladanov is a Chechen general, a Russian general. He's a commander in the Russian army. He's been pulled away as a frontline commander. He's been pulled away from his duties and sent to the Russian General Staff Academy, where he is helping capture the lessons of the battlefield. He gave an interview the other day where he talked about the fact that the rate of decomposition of the Ukrainian forces is such that major developments will occur by May, and the war could be over by September. And when he says the war over, he means that the Ukrainians no longer have a military. This isn't me speaking. I mean, I believe this. This is my assessment too, but it's coming from a frontline commander who's known for his not to be a wild-eyed person. He's a man who has performed well on the battlefield. He's very cognizant of the realities of the battlefield, and he's saying that the Ukrainian army will not be able to survive on the battlefield. They're being pushed back. And if you take his words and then you take a look at the Russian forces and where they're located, you see that the Russians are making a push towards Zaporizhia. And that logically means that they can pivot south towards Mykolaiv. And that logically means that they can push on, bypassing Odessa and link up with the Transnistria region, and that Odessa will eventually fall. I think this is the plan. I think the Russians have the forces accumulated to do this. And I think that the Ukrainian ability to defend against the Russian advance is rapidly dissipating. So I believe you're going to see the dramatic disintegration of the Ukrainian army along the front by May. That's the timeline that Abdi Aladanov has also spoken of. And I think you're going to see the end of this phase of the war by September, which means the occupation of Odessa, the occupation of Mykolaiv, Dnipropetrovsk, and Kharkov, because the Ukrainians simply will not have the ability to continue to defend these spaces.
Im Westen hält sich hartnäckig der Glaube, dass Waffenlieferungen oder allein finanzielle Unterstützung die Ukraine zu einem Sieg befähigen könnte. Oder wenn nicht, so doch zu einem Friedensschluss mit vorteilhaften Konditionen. In den Medien kursieren Berichte über mögliche Wunderwaffen, die einen Umschwung auf dem Schlachtfeld erzielen könnten. Zuletzt war das zum Beispiel der deutsche Marschflugkörper Taurus. Aktuell wird über die Entsendung von britischen und kanadischen Drohnen diskutiert, etwa die vom Typ 800 Skyranger R-70. Diese Drohnen sollen mittels Schwarmtaktik die russischen Streitkräfte aufreiben. Immerhin gab es in den letzten Wochen Berichte, dass sich die Russen schwer tun in der Abwehr von einfachen Drohnensystemen. Was sagst du zu diesem Vorhaben, Scott? Wie können diese Drohnen eingesetzt werden? Und haben sie die Fähigkeit, das Blatt zu wenden für die Ukraine?
I'm not a believer in miracle weapons. History has shown that there's no such thing as a miracle weapon. At the end of the day, it's the boot on the ground and the quality of the man in the boot that matters. And where's the Ukrainian soldiers who are going to be operating these systems? These highly trained, highly motivated Ukrainian soldiers who believe in their cause. The Russians themselves have admitted that as the Ukrainians ran out of artillery ammunition, they turned to drones as their form of fire support. These first-person view suicide drones, and they brought a large number of them up. And yes, the Russians had difficulty in adapting to this. It's an effective weapon. But the Russians also are military professionals, and they quickly realized that for those drones to work, somebody has to be communicating with them. And the best way to stop these drones from flying is killing the people that are operating them. And the Russians have slaughtered these people. The Russians have targeted, the units, the men who are flying these drones. And the Ukrainians are not having effective drone operations today. So now they want to bring in this miracle weapon, and maybe the first week that they use, if these weapons work as advertised, they've never been used before. So let's just say that hypothetically the Ukrainians are proficient in their use and they bring them in and they deploy them. I think the Russians for a week will be going, what the heck is this new weapon? It's here, it's swarming, it's doing stuff. But the Russians are professional. Their intelligence personnel are going to be collecting the signals. They're going to collect the debris. They're going to send it back to factories that already have units ready to exploit them. And they're going to say, this is the weakness. This is the weakness. This is how it operates. And then they're going to adapt and they're going to slaughter the people that are using that. And the Ukrainian advantage will be gone. The Ukrainians, to fire the Taurus, need airplanes. The Russians will hunt down and kill these airplanes. It become a priority for the Russians. There is no such thing as a miracle weapon. And there's nothing the Ukrainians are doing that's going to change the fact that on the ground, you have an army that's composed of people who've been thumped on the head, stolen off the street, given no training, and thrown forward. They don't want to be there. They are not going to fight and die for Ukraine in the numbers that are necessary for this defense. So there is no such thing as a miracle weapon. The West is only fooling itself, and there's nothing the West can do to change the trajectory of this fight.
In den deutschen Medien wurde der Fall des kürzlich verstorbenen russischen Oppositionspolitikers Alexei Nawalny sehr hochgekocht. Unmittelbar erhob sich ein Aufschrei nach neuen Sanktionen gegen Russland. Ohne jede Untersuchung wird der russische Präsident Wladimir Putin als Drahtzieher einer unterstellten Ermordung Nawalnys dargestellt. Der EU-Außenbeauftragte Josep Borrell verkündete, das neue Sanktionspaket der EU gegen Russland werde den Namen Nawalny-Regime tragen. In einem kürzlich gegebenen Interview bei Danny Haifong hast du Stellung zur Synchronizität der Ereignisse genommen. Das Putin-Interview, dann der tragische Tod Nawalnys, just nachdem seine Frau ihn noch besuchen konnte und kurz vor Beginn der Münchner Sicherheitskonferenz. Kannst du diese Überlegungen für unser Publikum nochmals darlegen? Wie bewertest du den Fall Nawalny? Welche Verantwortung trägt die russische Justiz bzw. der russische Präsident Putin daran?
Well, to the extent that the Russian judiciary held Navalny accountable for his crimes and sentenced him for his crimes, I guess you can say they're responsible. I mean, if that's how you want to approach this. To the extent that Vladimir Putin is the president of Russia, who has created a system of laws where people are held accountable for their crimes through a judiciary, you can say he's responsible. But let's be honest here. The only one responsible is Navalny. Navalny made a series of decisions that were fatal to him, decisions that were also evidence of the fact that he wasn't you can't call him a Russian opposition leader, because to be a Russian opposition leader, you have to care about Russia. Navalny never cared about Russia. Navalny was a tool of Western intelligence services. He was somebody who got caught up in an American and British intelligence scheme in 2007, 2008 to orchestrate a color revolution to block the prime minister presidential swap that Vladimir Putin and Dmitry Medvedev were doing. He later ended up going to Yale University, where he was groomed by the CIA for the sole purpose of coming in and blocking President Putin's attempt to come back as president in 2012. This is regime change operations being carried out not by the Russian people. An opposition figure goes and wades into the Russian people and says, I have a better idea. Vladimir Putin is a bad leader. I am going to fight corruption. I am here for you, the Russian people. I am a Russian, etc. Navalny didn't say any of that. He sat there and said, the CIA is paying me. I'm working off a script given to me by the CIA. He's a CIA operative. His organization was funded by British intelligence. There's a videotape of his deputy asking a British intelligence officer for $10 to $12 million to carry out their work. It exists. They are not Russian. They are traitors. You need to understand that right off the bat. He's not a Russian opposition figure. He is a traitor of Russia. He betrayed Russia. He was working for the CIA and MI6. End of story. Now, for all you Germans out there that want to say that you're somehow high and minded, before you start jumping on this bandwagon, I have a simple question for you. Why hasn't the German government released the laboratory results of the German military laboratory that did the testing of Navalny and claimed that he had Novichok poisoning? Why is it that the medical results that were released by German doctors don't show any evidence of Novichok poisoning? In fact, what they show is evidence of perhaps an overdose of antidepressant drugs. Could it be, Germans, that you were set up by your own government? That in order to, Navalny was he was neutered as a opposition figure by the Russian government, who found him guilty of crimes. If you're really interested in Germany, ask yourself, what was Navalny doing in Kirov region from November of 2008 until September of 2009? Has any of you wonderful Germans who are ready to destroy your nation in the name of Navalny, have you asked that question? Have you looked at the scheme that he did? Because he was broke. He had no money. Broke. So he went to Kirov to make money. How did he make money? He went to Kirov and he did a classic, used the government. Remember, this is Mr. Anti-Corruption Fighter, an anti-corruption fighter. And he went in and pulled a corrupt scheme. He went in and allowed himself to be presented as a representative of the governor of Kirov. He met with the director of a company that produces lumber, and he convinced the guy to sell to his trading company that he created lumber at a cut rate so that they could sell it at inflated prices and take a commission off of those inflated prices, making money. And then, to show you just how despicable this human being is, he then audited this lumber factory and found evidence of mismanagement, and he had the guy fired before dissolving his trading company and fleeing Kirov with lots of money in his pocket. And the Russians held him to account. They put him on trial. They found him guilty. He was neutered politically. He couldn't maneuver in Russia because he couldn't run for office. He couldn't do anything because he had this conviction. So what needed to be done? He needed to get out of Russia. But how does somebody who's convicted under house arrest get out of Russia? Oh, the Novichok. Yes, the world's most deadly chemical substance. I mean, one whiff of it kills millions. You can't recover from it. I mean, if it touches you, you boil into nothing and you die, like the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz. But Navalny apparently drank it in his tea, drank in his water, and it had impregnated his underwear, and he survived. He was never poisoned by Novichok. The German government knows this because they know there's no evidence of this. This is why they're suppressing it. They were part of an intelligence scheme to get Navalny out. He miraculously recovers from the Novichok poisoning. Miraculously. Nobody survives Novichok, but Navalny does. And then, while he's in his hallucinatory moment, He says, I want to make documentary films. Now, I've made documentary films. I made one. I'm making one now. They're very difficult things to do. It's hard to do it right. But suddenly he has a production crew ready. They fly to a German safe house in the Black Forest where suddenly in a month span, 1 month, he produces not one, but 2 documentary films. Putin's Palace, which is a hit job on Putin, designed to destroy the credibility of Putin, and then Navalny, the Academy Award-winning documentary that elevates Navalny to presidential status. This is the man that can lead Russia. Did Navalny come up with this in his hallucination? No. These scripts were written by the CIA, by British intelligence, by German intelligence. And they produced 2 documentaries. Then what did Navalny do? He went back to Russia. Why? Why would you go back to Russia? You're a convicted criminal. You violated probation. Because the CIA and the British believed that there was a lot of controversy going on in Russia about the 2021 constitutional changes that Putin was getting ready to do that would make Russia bomb-proof against CIA and British interference. Remember, the CIA and the British have been conspiring with Navalny and others to remove Putin from power, interfering in the elections, regime change operations. Vladimir Putin's not an idiot. He and his supporters studied how they do this, and he passed laws that neutered their ability to covertly fund these opposition people with secret money. And then he changed the Constitution so that he can run for president again, not in 2 4-year terms, but 2 6-year terms. And then he moved power structures around so that no matter what happened to him, the system would survive. Not the system that the CIA wanted, the Russian system. And that's what's important here. Putin is a Russian leader. Whether you like him or not, he's a Russian leader, and he's doing things for Russia. And the Americans were in a panic because they knew if Putin succeeded in that, it was over. You were never going to change this regime. They were stuck with an independent, strong Russia for a very long time. So Navalny returned to Russia. He was arrested. 2 days after his arrest, or 2 weeks, I can't remember, they released Putin's Palace. Now remember, the purpose of Putin's Palace was to get everybody outraged over Vladimir Putin's corruption and the corruption of his scheme, to delegitimize him in the eyes of the Russian people, to destroy the ability of him to win this referendum to change the Constitution. Except it turned out to be the dumbest thing in the world. Nobody believed it. It was an obvious cook. I mean, how do you come up with these sophisticated computer-generated graphics? Because the movie's full of these 3D graphics. Remember, Navalny conceived this idea in October. In December, they started the production, and suddenly they have these graphics. Well, it was already built. The CIA had already done it, and they did a sloppy job because the CIA is not that good. But they released the movie. That flops, which means that Navalny's not in a position when Navalny, the presidential empowerment movie, comes out. Well, it's too late. Navalny's in jail. Gambit failed. He wasn't released from probation to lead the Russian people in a revolt against Vladimir Putin. They found him guilty of his crimes, imprisoned him, then started hitting him with more corruption charges and extremism charges. Next thing you know, he's facing a 30-year sentence in jail. He's going to die in prison. That's the reality. And Putin succeeded in 2021. He got the referendum. He changed the Constitution, and it's done. So now the United States has this investment in this guy named Navalny. I mean, it did win an Academy Award, the documentary that was produced. So it was a success, I guess, in that way. But Navalny's in prison. The man they wanted to be king is in prison, never to come out. What do? You've gone through all this thing to elevate Navalny, the Navalny brand. Navalny, Russian opposition, democracy. But the man who's supposed to be leading the brand is a corrupt extortionist in jail forever, never getting out. You have to change the game. They've already once gotten Navalny, and I'm telling you, the Germans release all the data. It will show that Navalny deliberately overdosed on antidepressants to create a medical emergency so he could be evacuated from Germany. This was a CIA plot because the CIA was waiting there. In October, when Navalny's been evacuated, the Russian government, Peskov, the Kremlin spokesperson, says, we know what's going on. The CIA is there. He's working with the CIA. We know what's happening here. It was so obvious that the CIA was waiting for him. This was a setup to produce these movies to bring down Putin. So they already got him once to take pills to generate a medical collapse. There's no debating this. I mean, people can debate me about it, but I'll just tell the German government, produce the medical results. You won't. Why? Because what I'm saying is true. The German government's complicit in this. So now he's in prison. And let's just reverse engineer it. Today, right now, Navalnaya, Yulia, is the face of Navalny. She's the darling of the West. The brave widow has stepped up and has taken the lead. She is now the opposition around which the West will continue to do. Without her, you couldn't have the Navalny sanctions to weaken. Without her, you can't have this whole movement now to try and attack Vladimir Putin at the moment when he's having the greatest success globally. You understand this is an intelligence-driven operation that's going on here, and she is the key to it. But she can't be the key to it if he's still alive. So now we back up further, and we see that he was visited. Medications were provided 2 days before his death. The Russians have his body. They're doing a detailed chemical analysis. Let's see what it says. But what I believed happened is a scene straight out of Godfather 2 at the end, when Frankie Pentangela betrayed Michael Corleone. And he was met by a lawyer in prison. And a deal was made that Frankie's family would be okay. Everything will be okay, Frankie. Everything will be okay. But Frankie, you know what you need to do. You need to kill yourself. You need to die. Look at Navalny, his daughter, Stanford education. The world is her oyster right now. She can go out now using the Navalny brand and she will survive. She will never want, his son will never want. His wife is the new darling of the West. Don't worry about anything, Frankie, Five Angels. Everything will be okay. You know what happened. I know what happened. Everybody knows what happened. Can it be proven? I don't think so. But connect the dots. Navalny was in prison, Navalnaya's lover, this boyfriend that apparently Navalny knew about. He did a video 4 days before Navalny's death where he talks about how their plans for, and again, if you're a Russian, please listen to this. Listen to that video. He and Navalny want to divide up your resources, not for the benefit of Russia, but for the benefit of international bankers, for the benefit of the West. It's the 1990s all over again. But it can't happen unless there's something dramatic that comes out of the prison. He said it 4 days before. Don't worry, Frankie, Five Angels. Everything's going to be okay.
Der Fall Nawalny wird als Fanal genommen, um die Demokratie in Russland an sich in Frage zu stellen. Der Westen zeigt mit dem Finger auf vermeintliche politische Gefangene in Russland. Gleichzeitig sitzt der Journalist und WikiLeaks-Gründer Julian Assange seit fast 5 Jahren im Londoner Hochsicherheitsgefängnis Belmarsh und wartet auf seine Abschiebung in die USA. Ärzte und Menschenrechtler warnen seit Jahren davor, dass Assange an den Haftbedingungen und der Isolationshaft sterben könnte. Auch warnen sie vor einer Auslieferung an die USA, wo ihm 175 Jahre Haft, ein unfairer Prozess und Folter drohen. Von führenden westlichen Politikern ist im Fall Assange jedoch keine Empörung zu hören. Was sagt der Fall Assange über Demokratie und Pressefreiheit im Westen aus? Ist er mit dem Fall Nawalny vergleichbar?
Well, it's not comparable because Navalny was a traitor. Navalny betrayed his country. Navalny worked for the CIA. The CIA is trying to kill Assange. There's the difference. If you can't see that, then I can't help you. Navalny was working with the CIA to undermine Vladimir Putin, not through democratic processes, but part of a coup d'etat. Navalny is the furthest thing from a democratic figurehead that one can imagine. He's a total artificial construct. Julian Assange is a journalist. He's exercising, through his journalism, the empowerment of the people so that the people can be fully informed about the crimes of their government. That is democracy. Democracy is the people holding their government accountable for the sins that are committed in their names. And what Julian Assange did is put the information on the table that said, you are being lied to. By whom? By the CIA, by the U.S. government, by the State Department, by the president, by the Secretary of State. Everybody is lying to you. That's democracy. Empowering the people so they can hold their representatives accountable. And for all you Germans out there, and again, I'm picking on the Germans because I think that's the focus here. You wonderful Germans that are going to support the Navalny sanctions, who supported your government's role in facilitating an illegal coup d'etat, or trying to get an illegal coup d'etat in place in Russia. Will there be the Julian Assange sanctions when Julian Assange dies? Because he's going to die. He's going to die. And you murdered him. You're responsible. All of you. Every single one of you. You're sitting there right now supporting a CIA agent, Navalny, and you're condemning the man who exposed the lies of the CIA, the lies of the U.S. government. The U.S. government, the same U.S. government, by the way, which blew up Nord Stream, your $12 billion energy security infrastructure project. God, if Julian Assange was alive, I bet you'd probably know about who blew up Nord Stream, because Julian Assange's mission was to find out these inconvenient truths and publish the documents that would show it. You miss Julian, don't you? Actually, you're glad he's not there. That's the problem. You don't want to know the truth. Julian Assange would probably have uncovered the documents that prove that the Novichok attack on Navalny was a lie. But you don't want to know the truth. You want to believe the lies. You enjoy being a tool of CIA manipulation. And you stand for nothing. You should be ashamed of your embrace of Navalny. You're being used like a bunch of sheep, being led to your own slaughter. You're not defending democracy. You're defending lies. You're defending intelligence service manipulation of democratic processes. And you're allowing this journalist, this wonderful journalist who tried to empower you with knowledge and information, you're allowing him to die, to be murdered by the same CIA that gave you Navalny. You disgust me.
Lass uns nach Deutschland schauen. Ende letzter Woche haben Bundeskanzler Olaf Scholz und der ukrainische Präsident Wladimir Zelensky ein auf 10 Jahre ausgerichtetes Sicherheitsabkommen unterzeichnet. Darin verpflichtet sich Deutschland, die Ukraine militärisch, wirtschaftlich und finanziell zu unterstützen. In seiner Ansprache an das deutsche Volk beteuerte Scholz, es gebe keine Alternative, als die Ukraine zu unterstützen, as long as it takes. Auf Deutsch, so lange wie nötig. Auch wenn das deutsche Volk die wirtschaftlichen Folgen längst spürt, aber man müsse Europa schützen vor einer sich ausdehnenden russischen Aggression. Zum Abschluss seiner Rede beschwichtigte Scholz jedoch und sagte, es wird in diesem Krieg keine deutschen Soldaten in der Ukraine geben. Und das Sicherheitsabkommen bedeute nicht, dass Deutschland eine Partei des Krieges wird. Was sagst du dazu? Wie intensiv und wie lange muss Deutschland die Ukraine unterstützen, um schließlich doch eine Kriegspartei zu werden? Und was sagst du zu der Formulierung, dass deutsche Soldaten in diesem Krieg nicht in der Ukraine kämpfen werden?
Well, I mean, let's start with that one. German soldiers will not fight in Ukraine in this war, which means that the German security guarantees are meaningless, because the only war that Ukraine's going to fight against Russia is this war, which they're losing and they're going to lose. And when Ukraine loses this war, there won't be a Ukraine left. Whatever signed this agreement with Germany will no longer exist. So the agreement is null and void. And Olaf Scholz knows this. He knows that he's just simply papering over the reality that Germany can do nothing to prevent the defeat of Ukraine. That's just a straight up fact. But it's also, I mean, again, the German people, to all the German farmers out there, A, God bless you. B, keep doing what you're doing. Because C, Olaf Scholz just told you that funding a neo-Nazi supporting regime in Ukraine with German taxpayer money is more important than giving you the subsidies that you need to survive as farmers. that Scholz cares more about Ukraine than he does about Germany. When I lived in Germany in the 1980s and late 1970s, 1980s, and I fell in love with, as all teenage boys do, with the Autobahn and speed. And I fell in love with the Porsche 911 SC Turbo, rough modified. All you Germans out there know what I'm talking about when I say rough modified. It was a beast of a vehicle, fast, etc. Couldn't afford it though, because it's German made, quality German stuff. It's expensive. Olaf Scholz just made me a very happy guy, because Porsche just announced that they're going to be shutting down production in Germany and transferring production to America. Thank you, Olaf Scholz, because now America owns the Porsche brand. It's an American car, made in the USA, and I might be able to afford one now. Thank you, Olaf Scholz. You're my favorite German in the world, because you just made a little teenage boy's dream come true 50 years later. But joking aside, he's destroying your country. Destroying your country. You are being deindustrialized as we speak. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about Germany or the Germans. He is a tool of America. This is the same man that stood in the White House at a podium while the President of the United States in front of him said, "I'm going to blow up Nord Stream." And Scholz didn't say anything because he's a cuckold. That's what he is. He's a man who isn't a man. He's a man who stands for nothing. And he's betrayed Germany, and he continues to betray Germany. But Germany, you betray yourself by allowing this man to stay in power. I come back to the German farmers. Keep doing what you're doing. Revolution is the only chance you have at surviving.
Kannst du zum Abschluss noch ein paar Worte an unser deutsches Publikum richten? Wir bekommen oft von unseren Zuschauern zu lesen, Scott Ritter gibt zwar eine ausgezeichnete Analyse und seine Aussagen über Deutschland sind hart, aber dennoch zutreffend, oftmals fehlt jedoch eine Perspektive. Viele unserer Zuschauer teilen deine Kritik an der Bundesregierung, an der verfehlten deutschen Politik und an der Unterordnung Deutschlands unter die US-Interessen. Aber sie fragen gleichzeitig, was tun? Welche Perspektive kannst du aus der US-Sicht geben, Scott? Immerhin schaut dein Land auch zurück auf einen langen Kampf gegen koloniale Unterdrückung, gegen einen übermächtig erscheinenden Gegner. Welche Ratschläge kannst und willst du der deutschen Bevölkerung geben?
Well, the first thing is, if you continue to do nothing, if you continue to say, well, what can I do? What can I do? Then you're going to be destroyed, because Olaf Scholz doesn't care about you. Remember, this time last year, Porsche was making automobiles. They're not going to be making it because you didn't do a damn thing. You sat by and did nothing while your economy is being destroyed. All those people that had the jobs and they're saying, well, I don't want to do anything because I don't want to lose my job. You lost your job, and you're all going to lose your jobs because Olaf Scholz doesn't care about you. You've bought into this dream that's no longer valid. The German people need to do a couple things. One, recognize that NATO is a suicide pill. Olaf Scholz has signed this agreement that guarantees your death if you ever fight Russia, because you cannot beat Russia. It's over. Done. You can never beat Russia. Ever. You will never beat Russia. There are tanks in Berlin on pedestals, Russian tanks, that prove you will never beat Russia. If you want to continue down this path, you'll just upgrade those tanks from T-34-85s to T-90s, because Russia will crush you again if that's the path you want to take. Do you really want to go to war? We're not going to have German troops involved in this war. Well, what war, Olaf? What war? And the German people need to ask that question. What war? Because he just committed you to a war with Russia that you will lose. What can we do? You can die, and you will die. So now that I have told you that your fate is to die, accept your death. And now you can move forward with confidence and say, now what do we need to do to stop this? Because you now know that if you don't stop this, you're going to die. It's inevitable. Your death is a preordained outcome. So now that you know you're going to die and you've been free of that, you can clear your clouded brain and realize that Olaf Scholz is the problem. The German government is the problem. And since they are an extension of NATO and American policy, the problem is NATO and American policy. So what can you do about that? Revolution. And I'm not talking about violence, not okaying violence. There's nonviolent revolution. You can overthrow this government, but you need to know where you want to go because you're scared. What are we going to do? How are we going to live? Oh my, oh my. Well, let's go back to basics. You need Russian energy. You need Russian energy. You need Russian gas. You need Russian oil. You need Russian coal. There's your salvation right there. Russia is your salvation. But it's not just Russia. Go talk to the executives. Remember this last spring, I think fall actually, Germany sent delegations over to China. And because Germany was going to de-risk. Remember that? That's the word. We're going to de-risk. Well, what does de-risk mean? It means sanctioning China. But now let's take the Volkswagen. They were told to de-risk, which means you have to unplug from China. But the Volkswagen executives turned around to the German government and said, you do know that we don't make any money in Germany. We don't make any money in Europe because of you. Everything we do here is in the negative. We have to shut things down. The only reason why we're able to continue to function as a company is because of China and our operations in China. That's where we make money. And now the German government's saying you have to unplug from that, commit suicide. What does that tell you, German people? Stay in China. Work with the Chinese. They have a thing called the Belts and Roads Initiative. Get the Chinese to help you. Well, we can't do that. Why not? Oh, historically, we've been linked to America. America blew up your damn Nord Stream pipeline. We don't care about you. America gave you Olaf Scholz, who wants to commit you to a war that will result in your death. You're already dead. Stop being afraid. If you want to live, divorce yourself from that which is killing you. It's simple. Russian energy, Chinese economics, pivot to the East. There you are. Let me give you 5 letters that will be your salvation. BRICS. Germany needs to become a member of BRICS. Germany needs to get out of the European Union because it is a sinking ship. It has hit the iceberg and it's going down. And it doesn't matter how beautiful the music is played by the band on the ship. It's going to sink and everybody on that ship's going to die. The EU is finished, done. NATO is a poison pill. BRICS can be your salvation. Your economy needs large quantities of cheap energy. Russia can provide that. You're dead. It's okay. Don't worry about it. You're already dead. So how can it hurt you to say, we don't want to be a member of NATO anymore? How can it hurt you to say, we don't want to be tied to the European Union anymore? You say, we have no alternatives, but you do. You don't have to be a member of a military alliance. You don't have to be a member of a military alliance. There's a thing called neutrality. And your economic future doesn't lie with the West that's trying to kill you, but to the East that's willing to work with you. There, Germany, I just gave you the roadmap. Don't be afraid. You're already dead. It doesn't matter.
Liebe Zuschauer, wir sagen herzlichen Dank an Scott Ritter für seine Zeit und umfassenden Analysen. Und auch an euch, wie immer. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen. Wenn euch die Sendung gefallen hat, teilt unser Video breit in den sozialen Medien und abonniert unbedingt unseren Kanal Gegenpol. Folgt uns auch auf den Plattformen Odyssey und X. Und wenn ihr mal Fragen habt, die wir unbedingt an Scott Ritter stellen sollen, dann schreibt sie uns in die Kommentare. Ich sage Tschüss und bis nächste Woche bei Im Auge des Bruders mit Scott Ritter.